or now Taiwan with semiconductors, with no ideological dimension. Perhaps in South Africa, apartheid was, well, the Saudis happen to be Muslim, Sunnis, and Arab. And therefore, they are part and parcel of the Arab-Israeli and Muslim-Jewish conflict. If you add to that, that not only are they one of some 24 Arab countries or other Muslim countries, but they see themselves as leading the Muslim world. They are the guardians of the two holiest places, Mecca and Medina, Jerusalem being the third holiest in the Quran. And the Saudi monarch, along with the Jordanian one and the Moroccan one, they have a vested interest in running East Jerusalem, Haram al-Sharif. You cannot separate Saudi Arabia, even though not only does it not border Israel, you may say that it is twice removed. You have to go through Jordan and Iraq, Syria and Iraq, in order to get to Saudi Arabia. But nevertheless, their influence is such that, first of all, they can give a lot of money to Israel's neighboring countries, such as Egypt. And what Faisal did 50 years ago was have a decisive voice in the oil embargo. The cut-off of oil, and then raising the price so that the entire Western world was impacted, and it had an influence on American policy, obviously European policy, vis-a-vis the conflict. So if Israel can placate MBS by giving in to some of his demands.
Good morning, everybody. Well, just want to point out, if you wanted to know what happens when a person goes to New York, everybody look at Daddy. Who's wearing a tie at 9:15 in the morning? Back again, Daddy, with a tie. But your seat is safe. You notice that? Look at that. Right here. Nobody is sitting in your bucket, Daddy. What can I tell you?
Where Israel has an amazing collaboration with.
He's taking off the tie. He's now back in Boca. Yeah, well, he should. He should. All right. Let's begin. 9B. 9-3.
Where are you going?
Where are you holding?
They're not going to
9-3.
realization with Israel.
That's
To say something similar.
We're holding 9-3. We're holding. We're about to say Rabbi Yochanan Hayu Bola My Ovidle. Okay, definitely Ben shut the door. Today's Gemara definitely shut the door. Gemara today.
Wait, Dav Ches Amud Aleph?
No. Test Summit Base.
Test Summit
Base. Okay.
Test Summit Base. Where?
Test Summit Base in the wide lines. Just give me a second. Rabbi Yochanan Hayu Bola My Ovidle. That's, if you take a look at the Tosfos Riazokein, it's right above, it's right by Ka'ira. The word Ka'ira, right over there is Rabbi Yochanan.
Test Amud Base?
Test Amud Base. Yep.
Test or the test?
Test 9.
Okay, how many lines from the wide line?
You know, we're in the wide lines. So from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines from the bottom. Okay?
From the bottom.
Yep, from the bottom. So, we are talking about, as you know, 3 different ways to be Mekadesh a woman. Money, kesef, shtar, a document. Kesef has to be worth at least a pruta. The shtar itself doesn't have to be worth anything. And bia is cohabitation. Again, we are talking about establishing the first part of marriage, Kiddushin, Erison, those are the one and the same. Erison or Kiddushin are interchangeable. Okay? So now, we're working our way through this. Now, of course, we don't use Bia as a way of anymore, but since biblically it's possible, we've got to go through this. We're going through it. So, Zafti Gemara, Rab Yochanan, Hai Ubala, my Ovidle. This phrase, Ubala, and he cohabitated her. Why do you need it? Okay? Hahumi Boyale, Zu Nikes Bibia. This woman can be acquired as a wife through cohabitation, but the Ein Amma of Ria Niknas Bibia. But a Hebrew maidservant cannot through a cohabitation. Because otherwise I might have thought the following. Sal Kedata Kamina, I might have thought 9b4. 9b4. Teisimi Kalvachaimimi Yavama. What do you call Teisimi Kalvachaimimi Yavama? Ma Yavama Shei Niknas Bekesef. Oh, Yavama, how is she acquired? Through cohabitation, right? With cohabitation with the brother. She falls automatically from her husband who died without children to the brother, right? So therefore, she's not acquired with money. Nonetheless, Niknas Bibia, she is acquired through cohabitation. Zusha Niknas Bekesef. Therefore, this regular woman, who can, of course, be acquired through money, Einoidin Sheniknas Bibia, could certainly be acquired through cohabitation. Therefore, I needed the pasuk to tell us that a Hebrew maidservant, right, cannot be acquired with Bia, cannot be acquired through cohabitation. So the Gemara is going to say this is not a great Kavachayim to make your argument with. Umali Yavama Shekain Zekuka Vaimedes, who's unique. That the moment her husband dies, what happens, everybody? The moment the husband dies without children, immediately she's connected with the brother. There's no action by the brother required to create the connection. So in essence, the first part of marriage, when it comes to a Yavama, happens right there. Well, it happens like this. In other words, no action takes place. They're already connected, the two of them. She can't marry anybody else the moment her first husband dies without kids. They're connected like this. She was not given any money. She wasn't given any shtar. The answer, therefore, is it's not comparable. You can't use Yavama as a comparative to any other situation because it stands uniquely on its own. To which the Gemara says, the Gemara concedes. So that's not our Hava that might have given us, that tells us because of that, we have to bring the pasuk to tell us that an Amma of Ria, a Hebrew maidservant, cannot be acquired through Bia, through cohabitation. Right? So now the Gemara is going to change.
They say acquired. You mean acquired for marriage or acquired for
slave? A Hebrew maidservant is acquired for servitude.
This refers to servant. We should read in the Torah that's that their rules and regulations.
Correct. In other words, an Amma of Ria, a Hebrew maidservant, can be given over. Oh, Jerry's here. What he called? The other Jerry. Don't take that wrong. Okay. Can be given over as a maidservant until she's 12. At 12, she automatically goes free. No, an Amma of Ria, a Jewish maidservant, a Jewish child, 12, automatic. Nothing happens. Automatic. She's free.
She's set free. She doesn't have to ask.
Nothing happens. It's automatic. An automatic. If the father gives her away in marriage, that's different. Gives away in marriage, at 12 she has the right to demand a get. Is the right in which normally she doesn't have the right. There she has the right to get a get. if the father gives her away in marriage before she's 12. Correct. And again, all of this is predicated on the idea that women need to be protected. Shalom Aleichem. Welcome back. Daddy, look who's back. You went to New York and he came down. Here you go. That's it. That's it. Very good. That's it. Exactly right. Anyway, so further. So here we go. Sal Kedata Chamina, I might have thought, since the pasuk says we're holding, by the way, on 9b4. 9b4, we're working our way through. Literally, wow. 9b4. So we're working our way through the third way of marriage. Again, money, which requires a pruta. Star, a document that requires nothing, just a document. And now B, a cohabitation, which of course we don't use, as we're going to see later on, because Rob said this is a terrible way of doing it, right? But again and again, we're talking about the first portion of marriage, the Kiddushin or Erishin. Remember, the word Kiddushin or Erishin are one and the same. So we use Erishin, we use Kiddushin, we mean the same thing, the first step of marriage. Okay? So, Sal Kedat Chamina. If he shall take another wife, the Torah is comparing a Jewish maidservant, an Amma of Ria, to the other wife of the master's son. In other words, an ordinary Jewish wife who was never a maidservant. Just like the regular wife can be acquired through cohabitation in Torah, right? Could get Kiddushin, Erishin, through cohabitation. Af Amma Bria Mekana Bibia. I might have thought, therefore, the Amma Bria, the Hebrew maidservant, can also be acquired through cohabitation, because at the end of the day, then what you were noting before, even if she's taken as and brought into the house as a maidservant, she could be married off to one of the sons. That's not a problem. So why in reality is she any different than the regular wife that this guy has? So the Gemara Kamash Malon, that our Gemara says, Uba Allah, that only a regular woman can be acquired through Bia, but a maidservant, an Amma, cannot. And the answer, of course, guys, if you really want to look at it from another point of view, the why of it is pretty obvious. Because one is marriage and one is a transaction. And again, we're making the subtle point that while marriage looks like a transaction, in its essence, it's not, because she's not chattel. Now you're going to argue the Amma of Ria is also not chattel. That is true. But she is an indentured servant until she turns 12. Just like an Ebed Ivri, it's really an indentured servant who goes out after 6 years, right? Or until Shemitah shows up or whatever. The point I'm trying to say here is that one is a business transaction and one is a marriage transaction. And in the Torah and Chazal clearly in explaining it are making the very subtle, not so subtle point, frankly. Don't make the mistake of thinking that you're acquiring a wife as if you're buying a loaf of bread. And too many people make that mistake because you would think, but we all know, look at the world we're living in today, where even our world is today, unfortunately, divorces are becoming far more prevalent than they ever used to be. And I've explained this before because we brought up our children without realizing that the world is a disposable world. You get a new car every 3 years, you have disposable dishes. I remember, just as an aside, when disposable dishes became ubiquitous, they started selling them. I remember my mother and my grandpa, why would you buy plastic? Use it, spend money, and then throw it away? Take the dishes, use the dishes, wash the dishes, and use it again, right? We all remember this. I remember like with bottled water, remember? When first bottled water came, everybody said, this is the most ridiculous thing. Who's going to pay for bottled water? Right? Turn on the tap. Right? You heard exactly. It would have been better for the environment. It did kill the environment. We didn't even think it that way. This was a question of basic. Right, exactly. It's all part of. We didn't realize that when we created the consumer, the Chinese consumer, throw things away mentality. What we were teaching our kids, so we should all be very careful as we move forward. We should realize the dangers of what we have done. No, it's not just it's everything. Listen, I was just speaking to a partner of mine, just fired again, another administrator in a nursing home. Okay, why? Same problem again. When he's not looking, the guy doesn't have the same work ethic. Young fellow, whatever. The work ethic is not quite the same. There's a more entitlement. They want to make the big salary without putting in the effort to do so. And whoever you speak to as an office and all that is finding the same problem over and over and over again. We're finding it in our management. Right? Watch it for doing nothing. For in essence, doing nothing. Which, by the way, just as an aside, you want to know how I believe that we are in the last 100 years of the Roman Empire. You know that the Gemara spends plenty of time talking about theaters and the circuses and the Colosseum, and it's terrible, you're not allowed to go, and all that. You've all heard it, right? You know these things. That is because in the last 100 years of the Roman Empire, entertainment was such a major driver of their GDP. Look at our GDP. How much of our GDP is run on entertainment? Netflix, Amazon, HBO Max, what do you call the sports, gambling on sports. Put it all together in a pot. I believe it's somewhere between 35 to 40%, something crazy number of the GDP, which means the GDP has got a huge number in it with noise that signifies nothing. If you pulled it out, nothing would change because it doesn't add anything. It's not even a service. Forget about a production. It's not even a service. And it's a huge amount of the GDP. No society can sustain that. Sustain itself on Luft, as the Rebbes of a different time would say. Luftgeschäfte. Right? Look, that's what the word. Remember that? Luftgeschäfte. Yeah, fluff. Go, you could hear this in the Lubavitch. The Lubavitchers of Chayil Levroch used to say that a lot of time. Right? It's Hevel Avolim. The Elamabah, it's just here. It's nothing. It doesn't mean there are no mamashas. You have to recognize what we're dealing. So the answer is in all of this, in all these commercials that we're doing, you're going to see the problem here is the Chazal did not want us to get to such a place ever. So let's keep going here. The Rebbe, Hai Sabal Minole, Rebbe who does use cohabit with her as the source of Kiddushin, that we do Kiddushin through cohabitation. Hai Svarim Minole, where does he know that an Amma Avriya is not allowed to be purchased through cohabitation? Im Kain, says Rebbe, Lichtay Brachmana Uba'al. My Uba'al law and cohabit with her. Shmamina Tarte. It's coming to teach too. That number one, you could be Mekadesh, a regular woman with Kedusha, with Bia, but at the same time, only a regular woman and not an Amma Avriya. Like we explained before, because fundamentally there's a difference. Now it says Ula Rava, the Amma Bar Ahina, a Sabrali, and according to Rava, who said Bar Ahina, explained this to me. Ki yikachish isha uba Allah and cohabitates with her. Kiddushin amisurin lebia have Kiddushin. Kiddushin, which is given over to the possibility of legal cohabitation, is valid. We don't know what that means yet. Kiddushin she'ein misurin lebia lo yavi Kiddushin. Kiddushin, which is not given over for legal validation, it's not valid. How will you explain these laws? Im Kain, if that's the case, if that's only these two laws, that Kiddushin, you can be Mekadesh through Bia, and that an Amma Avriya, a Hebrew maidservant cannot be acquired in such a way. Nichtav kra oy ba'ala, or cohabit with her. My ubala, and. In other words, adding something. Shema Minov Kula, we're going to learn all the halachas. We're going to learn all the halachas. Okay, now it happens to be that what Rabbi says over here, right? Okay. So here's the question. Because there's a big question really over here. So I don't have an answer. What does it mean that a Kiddushin that's not given over for beer? The classic example would be a divorcee to a kohen. Is a kohen allowed to marry a divorcee? No, it's forbidden. So it's an erisin not given over for cohabitation. It's an erisin that's really an illegal erisin. You, the kohen, you're not allowed to marry this woman, this divorcee. So it's a marriage that's given over. It's a marriage that's given over, right? It's a marriage that's given over not to be consummated. Now, the reason why this is somewhat fair is because we hold, good morning, Avi. Somewhat fair because we hold Kiddushin Toifis B'chayve Lavin, that even where there's a Chayve Lav, a prohibition, that you're not allowed to do this marriage, a kohen to a divorcee. But if he breaks the law and he does marry her, the halacha is the Kiddushin is Toifis. And now he has to give her a divorce. But the Kiddushin is a Kiddushin. We don't say that the Torah said you're not allowed to do it, and therefore you're not married at all. We say, Im kol zeh, that the Torah said you're not allowed to. Im kol zeh, you are married. And now you got to break it with a divorce. You have, very good. And that is where I want you to hold that thought. Because otherwise you'd have a question. How do you explain our Gemara? If at the end of the day, Kiddushin is chal by Chayve Lavim, then where do you ever have a case of Kiddushin Mesur Labia? Where do you ever have a case of marriage that's not given over for cohabitation? Every marriage is given over cohabitation, even those that are illegal, because we hold if it's illegal, it's still a marriage. The answer is, Ben, your words, which my father has pointed out many a time to us. Daddy, you've told us to me many times, right? That even though the Kiddushin is chal on Kiddushin types b'chayve lavim, you still must get divorced. Bezdin is going to force you to get divorced. In other words, de facto, because you did an act of Kiddushin, you gave her a coin, you did even though you're a kohen and she's a divorcee, and it's illegal, but since it was an act of Kiddushin, we're saying it's chal. But immediately afterwards, good morning, Jeff. Immediately afterwards, we're holding 9b4. Immediately afterwards, you have to get divorced. So in essence, we're saying, Rav is saying, yeah, you can have a Kiddushin. It's actually a Kiddushin. It's not given over for cohabitation. We're not letting you two shack up. The kids are the chalal, which means, what is a chalal? They're not mamzerim. Let's not get wrong. They're not bastards because there was none. But they cannot do anything. They are in essence kahanim who are non-kahanim. The only thing to which the Gemara questions, are they inheritors of the father? That's something else, because that's not tied to kohen. But with regard to kohen, they do not get kohen. They are not allowed to they're not allowed to duchen. They're not allowed to get truma. They don't even have vikidashtoi. We don't know exactly. Today we still have to was a chol. If somebody were to fall in love with a divorcee, a kohen falls in love with a divorcee, gets married, and it does happen. And today we can't force them to get divorced. So they stay married and they have kids. their kids are chalolim. They lose, and it cholol keeps flowing down. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, in essence, they're Yisrael. Gemara talks about that in other places. That's exactly right. Right. Right.
All of a sudden, from one Shabbos to the next Shabbos,
Stop there. You only got Yisrael. Right. You see, that's. Look, I'm not saying you have to understand something. If you look at these laws from when you take a look from a 21st century, point of view, they're hard to understand. What makes them harder to understand, and this is what I always get to, especially with the mamzer, the child did nothing. The child is the innocent. So why is it that we're taking it out on the child but not the father? That father that produced that cholol, he still gets kohen. Yeah. So here's the situation, the answer. On a very simple thing. We're living through it. When you take the onus off the child, you've taken the onus off the adults. And if you don't believe me, look at the world we're living in today. In other words, if you didn't call the child a mamza, you took it out on the parents. You didn't take it out on the child. You know what would happen? You'd have a lot of mamza. And you need proof? Look at our world today. We went from a world, and I'm not just talking the Jewish world, I'm talking about the Goyish world. We went from a world where everybody was married, nobody lived before marriage. Remember in the early 70s when it started and it was a scandal? It was by the Goyim. Yeah, or living together before marriage by the Goyim. I remember as growing up that this was like a whole big thing. Today, it's on. Of course you're going to live together. You got to try it out. Like any other commodity. You get to try it out. And there's a return policy if it doesn't work. No, and they don't put their checkbooks together. Today, and now we're coming to the next step. They don't want to get married. And now we're already at the point where they're not having children. Why should I have children and it should affect my lifestyle? Or they're not, but they're not. They're having less in the Western world. Well, everywhere except in Africa, they're having less kids. You know why? Because once you took away the responsibility of marriage and made that the idea, marriage, children, grandchildren, like we do in our world. When you go ahead and you essentially say, there's nothing, marriage is nothing. So therefore you don't have to get married. Therefore it doesn't mean anything. Sex is not love. Sex is like breathing. It's like eating. It's just another desire. So therefore, what's the value of kids? All kids are going to do is mean that we can't go out to a movie night whenever we want. Just means we're going to be tired. It means we're going to have to spend. Our economy is going to be thrown off. Our household economy is going to be thrown off. You know what the Gemara says? The Gemara says if it wasn't for the fact of taiva, if it wasn't for the fact of sexual desire, men would never get married. That's why Hashem created it. In fact, there's a Gemara. There was a Gemara at one point. Avodah Zarah, idolatry, right, was very bad in our people. So a couple of the Rabbanim went ahead and davened to the Rabbanim Shalom, and Hashem took away the Yitzhar of Avodah Zarah. Then they said, well, if the Rabbanim Shalom is giving so much, let's take away the Yitzhar for negative, bad sexual behavior. So they removed it. Within months, no babies were being born. That was it. Exactly.
Chickens also didn't produce eggs.
Right? The chickens didn't produce eggs. Nobody. That was it. So the Gemara Torah says, gave the desire. So men would take women because men don't have a natural paternal feeling. Women have a natural maternal feeling. We need to see it in front of us in order to have the feeling. Women desire it. What? That has changed somewhat in our world. Yeah, talk about his world. His world, for an example, just use here. Do you know how the 830 minions really started? The 830 minions, Jerry knows. The carpool, exactly. You were one of them. Carpool, the guy.
You're not going to take anybody away from 645. Don't worry about 645 to 645. These are guys that together with their wives are getting the kids ready for school.
And our generation had no idea what they're talking about. Once in a blue moon. Once in a blue moon. See, he does it every day. That's it. It's not just you. I'm telling you, it's not just you. It's everybody.
Right.
Right. Oh, that's right. Yeah, right.
You know what? Between childcare and everything, what am I doing? I might as well be the childcare person right now. Okay? Let her do what she needs to do, and so on and so forth. Our generation, we look down at these things.
Right. We said, are you out of your mind?
Pressure is on the husband. The pressure is not
On the wife. And that's what today that's a normal way of thinking. It is. At the end of the day, I'm not denying equal. I have to be honest with you. I think I have to be honest with you. I think that there are great advantages of the way that it's being done today, as long as we're still requiring the husbands to do this. There's no confusion of rules. Right. In other words, as long as you're forced it is still expected that a husband is kavei itim l'Torah. He still has to come down with minyan. In other words, in saying we are now co-partnering in the day-to-day parenting does not mean that you as a man still are now not required to do the manly things that a Jewish man is supposed to do. In other words, you're supposed to help me, plus you're supposed to go ahead and find time for your daf yomi, find time to daven with minyan, etc. You do that, that's okay. The danger becomes, and that is a danger. I've spoken to my daughters about this. When you don't do that, because now he's working, you're all both coming home, you're both taking care of the kids, right? You're both even doing the laundry, the whole 9 yards. How does that work, right? You're too tired to come, you're too tired to go learn. Whatever it is, that you can't do. Because the moment you do that, now the balance is off in a Jewish home. In a Jewish home, we have to remember. God, remember what that Gemara in Bracha says. She sends her children off to yeshiva. She sends her husbands off to learn. And she waits for them to come back and make sure that there's supper on the table. Because at the end of the day, that's her tafkid. To build Torah Simecha, to influence all those around her to be better. She is the CEO. That is exact. That is why the Gemara in Bracha says those words. The Gemara says, "Noshim b'mayi zake yoyse b'anoshim." Why are women getting a bigger chelik in Yenevelt? You know why? Because they have to affect everybody else. They're supposed to be a mashpia. It's a big. So what? But we have to remember, in the Jewish world, that is at 100%. But you still have to find time to do bikvei to the That question is still going to be asked of you. Did you find time every day to learn? It's a different. Understand that. So you have to do plus. The plus is still the plus didn't change. The drive to become a Talmud Chacham, to learn and all that, still must be there. Remember, you're supposed to be Isaac B'Torah. Right? So, anyways, further. Okay, here we go. Where we let me see where we Imkain Niktav Kra Ibala, my Ubala Shma. I mean, not cool all the situation that the Amavri is not cannot be taken with cohabitation, that you can marry with your marriage could be with cohabitation, so on and so, and Kiddushin, that's chal, even though it's illegal, right? He called requires a divorce right away, and it's not what he called, and
Actually,
you will not create the Kiddushin.
actually, by Omer Ivriyo, there's a point where the son of the
About it before, she could marry her.
married. So the Torah wants him to marry her. So
Right.
so it is. You could say that he's
So I said that. So, Daddy, I said that before. So I said that before. I don't think you were here. I explained that before. At the moment of the transaction, the father did not bring her over for marriage.
Right.
Remember, a father has the right to marry her off as a child, and at 12 years old, she could demand a get, or he can send her over simply as a maidservant, as an indentured servant until the age of 12 when she goes out, just like this, without a get. That difference is exactly what the Torah wants to make a difference.
Okay.
That both are similar transactions. From the outside, they look the
Pick
same.
up the phone.
Go. So Zogti Gemara. Further, the Rebbe 9b5. The Rebbe High Bulas Baal, and Rebbe this phrase, a woman who cohabitates with a husband, my obadle. What does he use it for? Baal oisa buula shaloi kedarka. A husband renders his wife a non-virgin by cohabitating unnaturally through anal sex. The ain acher oisa buula shaloi kedarka. But somebody else does not make her into a non-virgin if it's what he called done unnaturally. What's going on here? This is a case, a girl, a Nara Marasa, a 12-year-old who's engaged, who gets raped. If the husband, when she got engaged, had cohabitated with her unnaturally, for the husband's point of view, she's already a non-virgin. They're married. They're non-virgin. They have Kiddushin. With regard to the guy who raped her, he raped her regularly, vaginally. She was a pasula. For him, he was a pasula. And his death penalty is stoning, not chenek, which in chenek means with the knife. It doesn't mean, by the way, when we say chenek, by the way, we all picture like in the movies, put their head down and the axeman comes and chops in the back of the head. It's like shechita.
Chenek is chenek is strangulation.
Strangulation. Oh, sorry. Strangulation. Right. So how did they strangle him? How did they strangle him?
They took like a scarf or something, put it around, and one person pulled one way, the other one pulled the other way, and
that was it. They did it. No. They weren't allowed to do that.
The name for that is a garrot.
A garret, right. The garret. No, yeah, the garret.
What you were talking about is sayif.
Or the Italian tie, they called it. Right, it's short.
What you were talking about is called sayif.
Sayif, right. I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Thank you, Daddy. So, it turns out for the husband, unnatural is good enough. For everybody else, she would then subsequently be raped, she would still be a basula and get stoning, and they would get stoning. Okay? So pray to Gemara, me Islay Rebbe L'Hai Svar. Does Rebbe really hold of this? But Tanya, we learned that's why the door is closed. By the way, if 10 men went and slept with her, okay, they raped her, group rape, right? While she's still a basula, kulam beskila, every one of them gets stoning. Rebbe, I'm ani harisha b'skila. Only the first guy gets skila because he's the one who broke her Haman. He's the one who broke the virginity. The kulam bechenek and the rest get strangulation. So how could Rebbe use the word bu'ulas baal to teach that the husband but nobody else renders her a non-virgin in this manner? Zakti Gemara Daf Yud Amar Rab Seira Moide Rebbe le'inyan kenas the kula mishalme. Rebbe agrees that if she's deemed a virgin with respect to paying the fines. In other words, her attacker has to be fined 50 shekels of silver. An unmarried virgin, so a single girl gets raped. We go ahead and we say we don't kill the rapist. And we don't throw him into jail because what use is that for the girl? She's still raped. Instead, we hit his pocketbook. And then we make him marry the girl. And she could decide if she wants to get divorced. He can't. No, on the contrary. She gets the money anyways. Okay? In this case, the money goes to her father. But the point is, because she's still a kid. But that with regard to the kanas, and in respect to this area that he says the word bu'ulas baal, why is her status with regard to fines different than her status with regard to the death penalty? Right? With the death penalty, when she's a virgin, it's skila. When she's not a virgin, it's chenek, it's strangulation. Says the Gemara, Shani Hosav the Amakra, Umeisa Ish Ashishochav Imoy Levadoi. And the man that lies there, he alone shall die. The word alone, who shall Imo Levadoi, him alone. Oh, go get him. Hi, Michael, get a chair. So you're good. You're not here. Okay. You think you're passing. Yeah. Okay. However, you are here. So let's see how long let's see if we can keep him here. All right. Shanu Meisa Isha Shocham Imay Levadai. And the man that lies with her, he alone, who Levadai. What's the word Levadai doing there? It should say he shall die. He shall die. What's he alone shall die? This means that if 10 men cohabitate with her unnaturally, meaning not vaginally, but anally, I told you he's not leaving so fast, and what do you call it, with a betrothed virgin, okay, with a girl that was engaged who's still a basula, right, who teaches us the first man shall die through stoning, the rest of them get strangulation. In other words, he's arguing not like we learned before. Okay, but the same thing. Interesting enough. The husband, she's considered engaged. Kiddushin Erethin. Because the husband slept with her unnaturally, anally. So for the husband's point of view, she's a non-virgin. Masha Aiken, with regard to those who raped her, certainly the first guy who raped her, albeit not even what he called the wrong way. Anally, not very vaginally, says Rebbe that he gets skila as if she's a virgin. Because Lamaisa, she is a virgin. What? Well, yeah, but that's not enough. It has to be a virgin. To get skila, you must have a virgin. The question is, right, Shaloi Kedarkoi, seems to create a Kiddushin, but lav dafka doesn't break the virginity. In other words, virginity is not an act of sex. Virginity is an act of the Haman being broken.
So relevant. I interject something
Sure.
you're going to find useful for experience.
Yes. Told you Michael wasn't going anywhere.
No, I actually, before I'm done here, I told
Yeah,
somebody
yeah.
to get off the phone, so I have to tell you this because you're going to find this useful.
I'm sure. Go ahead.
I agree.
Right. That
And I've worked on some cases.
Right.
And most of us, we have a passing understanding of sadomasochism is sexual standpoint. When you work on stuff, and you understand, and it blows my mind,
It's all about
the
power.
degree of mind control that what happens to people, to the female or to the submissive person, they end up crossing boundaries they never in a million years would have even thought of. And it's not even just a sexual thing, it's also a mental thing.
It's not a sexual thing, it's a mental, of course it's a mental thing.
Absolutely. The idea of the teaching, attaching relevance of the idea, it's as if you were taking away a person's virginity. I'm thinking of a case I worked on, so relevant, so relevant. This is a woman who actually ultimately she killed herself.
Of course, guys, she's going to live with herself.
But she killed herself not even because of the actual acts of what they were doing, but he had so messed her mind up. And this woman was a physician at Harvard, brilliant, had the whole world in front of her, and she got in with the wrong person who did this to her, and she ended up killing herself. So what you're saying is so on point and relevant, goes beyond. I only interjected that it's not the adult, it goes way beyond anal sex.
So no,
It goes beyond the idea of boundaries where someone wouldn't even possibly, it's, as you said, the unnatural. It's an unnatural thing. This stuff is totally unnatural.
The Gemara calls it Shaloi Kedarkai. The definition of anal sex is not called anal sex in the Gemara. Shaloi Kedarkai, not the natural way. Because the Gemara understood the whole time. Hi, Moshe, good morning.
Mazel tov.
Right. I never. It happened. It happened in Muncie. It's as if it didn't take place. Mazel tov, Moshe. We should have said that. I'm sorry. It happened in Muncie. It's like it didn't take place. You know. Very good. Hey, we still need a Kiddush. Yeah, yeah. Maybe. Yeah. Okay. It's not here. I don't think it's good. Yeah. We're moving. So, Shalom Kedarkai. Because again, and I'm going to make the point over and over again because it explains so much of why the Torah allows a father to quote unquote marry off a young girl to another family, allowing her to get divorced at 12 or to give over as a maidservant until 12. Because the Chazal, the Torah, and therefore Chazal were deathly afraid of vulnerable women, of vulnerable girls. You're dealing in a world here where life was short, life was messy. It was the Wild West times 10 with the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash and the wandering Jews going in. We learned the Gemaras in Gittin how the girls and the boys jumped off the side of the boats when they would be taken by the Romans back to Rome for unnatural purposes. And they said, we're Jewish kids, we're not going to do this. And the girls jumped off first, and the boys then said, if the girls could do it, why can't we do it? We have to do the same. Right? And they said, and you know what they said there? The girls jumped off when they were being taken for the Kedarkai. We who are being taken for Shaloi Kedarkai, homosexuality, right? We certainly need to jump off the side of the boat. It's right there. It's flowing through the Gemara constantly. That the husband said the act. Hi, David. We're on 10A1.
So how does the Torah differentiate between semen exchange or reception and oral sodomy?
Patience. We're going to get the Gemara. We're going to get to that Gemara pretty shortly. When it gets to number one, what is intercourse? What is the definition of intercourse with regard to the law? And then we're going to come back to your question. Okay? Hold that question. Ask it when we get to that piece of the Gemara. Okay?
Thank you.
Very good. Because that's obviously where we have to get to. Because one of the rules here, we haven't gotten to the basic question. What is? We're going to get to Bill Clinton. We're going to get to Bill Clinton's question. We are getting to Bill Clinton's question. We are. Okay? But from a Torah perspective, obviously. Okay? So it's up to Gemara. V'Rabbanan hai levadai ma'ovedlei. In essence, your kind of question, what are they doing with levadai? Next word. They need it for the following. With regard to a man and a woman who are in an adulterous relationship. Umesu gam shneim, and both of them shall pass away. That teaches us that neither one of them are actually subject to the death penalty. That they're exactly alike. They both are of the age, i.e., adults. They're both adults in order to be able to get the death penalty from the courts. Divi Rabbi Shia. Rabbi Yomi, even if one of the two is a minor, the adult could be put to death. Umeis ha'ish asher shochav imai levadoi, by himself. What is the by himself? That even if only the guy was above the age of 13, but she was 11, she doesn't get killed. He gets killed. Okay? Now, it would and the Chazal would touch it up like Rabbi Yochanan, or like Rabbi Yonason. Okay, Bu'ulas Baal, Sai Rebbe, Sai the Chachamim, say it implies that a woman's husband, but nobody else, can render her as a non-virgin through Shaloi Kedarkai, the unnatural cohabitation. The Rabbi Yochanan, who uses the word Bu'ulas Baal to teach us that Kiddushin through cohabitation. How does he know that only a husband renders her a non-virgin, renders her a bu'ula with regard to Shaloi Kedarkai? Imkei, because if so, the pasuk said Nichtav Kra bu'ulas ish. If a woman cohabitates with a man, if every time anal sex would turn her into a non-virgin, then it should just say the cohabitation with any man. Why does it dafka say husband? Mashma mina tarte, that Kiddushin can be done through cohabitation, and it is only a husband who cohabitates with her, regardless of how he cohabitates, that makes her into a non-virgin, only with regard to him, not regard to the rest of the world. Yes, honey. Yeah.
So it's not the husband technically.
Well, you could say, wait, well. So Avi just made a very good point. If he's becoming her husband through the act, so he's really, but you see, first of all, she's a single. It's all happening simultaneously. Yeah, it's simultaneous. So in fact, we're going to get to this. In fact, we hold, just so you should all know, giving this away, that at the moment that the male member touches the outside of the female member, even prior to really any entering, that is a ready deal. Where this applies is the first night of marriage, the first time a man and a husband and a wife do things. We all know what's still halacha. After the first be'ilah, she is considered a nida, right? Even if she doesn't see blood. Today, most girls don't see blood because today girls go horseback riding, they play ball, they run, and all the things that we didn't allow our girls to do back in the day. Okay? But this thing. So, the bottom line of it is that if the member even goes in just a drop, you always tell the boy, don't go out. Go all the way in. Because if you go out, theoretically, you're not allowed to go back in. Because Bio has already been done. And now she has a din of Anita.
What does that mean? She has a what?
Din of Anita. Anita. Because we don't know the differences between bloods today. Have a wonderful day, Abby. What it goes. We don't know the difference between bloods, so that's where we're at. Now, we're going to talk about this more as we move along tomorrow.
So cohabitation is, at least on the surface.
On the surface, we're only on the
consummate Kiddushin, right?
A minat Torah. I'm stressing it. Midrabanan, this is not allowed.
Cohabitation destroy.
Meaning,
and can it end Kiddushin? Husband and wife. I mean, and
Well, I'll tell you, it could,
mean,
you meaning like
entertaining decision.
I know that if a second guy, if she was engaged to a kohen, and if somebody else comes along and sleeps with her, that could become problematic. Yeah.
Suppose she says to her husband, I just don't want to do it right. I just
Oh, so that's a different law. That's the halacha of a meredes. Moirid. Somebody who rebels.
can a husband rape it like an
No.
American law?
No. He can arrep it. He has theoretically he should divorce it. There's plenty of women. Listen, there's plenty of women who at a certain point don't want to do it. It happens. It's all over the United States, frankly. They say it is what it is. Theoretically, and using the word theoretically, because what do you call it? Every family dynamic is different. But theoretically, that makes her a meredes, rebelling against her husband, and he has absolute right to divorce her. Right. The truth of the matter is, even legally, those are grounds for divorce, obviously.
It's the opposite of American law in some ways.
In some way, again, family law, that is not where our laws and their laws come together. I'll give you an example. In our laws, if there's adultery, they get stoned. Here, try stoning somebody. Get the point? That's just the basic rule. Okay? And whatever. But that was the whole idea. By the way, that was the whole idea. We didn't want a Hefgewelt. We didn't want a world that was chaos. We didn't want the world that looks like it does today. And this is nothing new because Rome looked like this. And Greek looked like this. This is the old battle between Hellenism and Jerusalem. Jerusalem is not for chaos. If I may be so blunt, it's the difference between Yerushalayim and Tel Aviv today. I would not normally say that, but for the purposes of Torah, we have to say it. Are now religious. Well, yeah, that's the other. By the way, that's the other thing, and they're gerers, by the way. Not just religious, but we'll go into. I can tell you this: who's having the freaking babies? I told you I have a partner with 3 daughters in Herzliya.
You listen to this.
Between the 3 of them, who are all in their 30s, maybe one is already 40. Between the 3 of them, I think there's one grandchild. I think the one who has the grandchild is actually shacked up with another girl. So this child was not, no, I think whatever, she didn't do it the Jewish way. She had the baby like, the wedding call. Out of wedlock. Or whatever. I have no idea. Maybe she did it with somebody, with a guy. I don't know. Point is, not into marriage. He never discusses the grandkids. Okay? But that is a typical Tel Aviv family, unfortunately.
His name's Biden, right?
What?
His name's Biden, right?
Biden? Yeah, his name is not Biden, but very well put, yeah. Who's married to a Jewish girl now, by the way, I believe. Her name is Cohn. South African, she's last name is Cohn, a Cohen. Stepson or whatever. In Johannesburg.
His wife's sister made up a
Not
mess,
me.
and they called him up to
The Torah?
to set the blessing for the states.
Oh, okay, for the States. Okay, that he can do. All right. It's obviously. But the point here I'm trying to say is, this is just our world. Torah understood. The Eibishter knew what he created. He understood, given the chance, we're going to knock off the shackles and behave poorly. And behaving poorly within a couple of generations, you disappear. You disappear. And guess who's disappearing? If you really want to know what all the protests are and all that, it's got everything to do with demographics. It's got nothing to do with what he called. They could see that within 20 years, who the majority of the country is going to be. Tel Aviv ain't going to be Tel Aviv. The way they see it, it's going to look more like B'nai Barak, like it's what he called. That's where it's heading. It is. That's it. Weiter. So Ibayalu. Okay, we're going to go we'll go to 10:30. Ibayalu. Techilas bia kaina. Does the beginning? Here we go. Ibayalu. The beginning. Techilas bia kaina. Does the beginning of copulation affect Kiddushin? Or side bina kaina, or the end of copulation? Okay. Please look at number 9 on the bottom, everybody. Jerry, I'll read it out loud. Okay. According to most Rishonim, the beginning of copulation refers to ha'ara'ah, the first legally recognized stage of intercourse. The precise definition is subject to a machlokes and Yavamis. We learned. One opinion maintains that the term denotes the first contact of the male and female organs, while another holds it to the beginning of penetration. The end of copulation obviously refers to a more advanced stage of penetration. Okay? Here you go. Okay? So let's keep going. And David, when we finish this Gemara is where you ask your question. Nafkamina Kagoin Shah Araba. The practical difference is where the man initiates intimate contact with the woman. Upashta Yada, the Kibla Kedusha Meyacha. And then she stretches out her hand through the window and takes money from somebody else for Kiddushin. Okay, so just picture this. She's lying in bed. They're getting it on. He his thing, touches her thing. And before any kind of penetration, sticks his hand out. She sticks her hands out the window and takes money for Kiddushin from somebody else. Okay? Inami, is she betrothed to the first man or the second? Inami lekayin gadol the kakai besula babia. The question arises with regard to a kayin gadol acquiring a virgin by cohabitation. Is it allowed or not? Because he's only allowed to marry a virgin. But as Avi asked, if he's kind of with what he call it, that means first he penetrates and then he's kind of, that means he's actually kind of her, acquires her when she's not a virgin anymore. What's the din? Okay, so let me state this bluntly, by the way. You all understand that this is all theoretical. Okay? Now don't jump down my egg. What kind of woman is this? Good thing that we don't have smada here at the moment. I think you might want to tell Yaakov to stay away from Kiddushin and Yavamis at that Mashiach. Okay, Omer Ameima, Mishmei Derova. Kol haboyel datoy al gemar bia. Whoever cohabitates does it on the logic 10a2 on completing the intercourse. Iboyalu, therefore, the end of cohabitation affects Kiddushin. That's where his thought was. The end affects Kiddushin. So that would mean that the Kohen Gadol, she's still what he called, really cannot, therefore, really should not be Mekadesher with Bia. Okay? Obviously. Because the end creates Kiddushin, but she's already a non-virgin, but a virgin by the time he gets there. Number 2, is the first one, her Kiddushin that she accepted outside the window is Chal prior, because he didn't go all the way at the beginning. Ibayalu, 10 more minutes. Ibayalu, be in the Suin Isa or Erisin Isa. When we say cohabitation performed for the sake of Kiddushin, does it also serve to affect Nisuin as well, or does it only affect Kiddushin? In other words, does it cover everything, or does it only cover Kiddushin? Nafkamina, what is the difference? Liyerusha, to inherit the wife if she dies. Remember, a husband only inherits his wife after Nisuin, after full-fledged marriage. Ulatamaba. And if he's a kohen, he's allowed to be metama, contaminated, to bury her. And to annul her vows all by himself, it's only after nisuin. He could do all of them. It only makes erisin, and he can't do any of that. So, what's the halacha? Let's learn it from the Mishnah. The Mishnah is found in Kesubas. A father of a girl who's a katana or a nara has the rights to his daughter's Kiddushin with respect to money or cohabitation, any method with which her Kiddushin is affected. And he has the right to her lost objects that she finds the produce of her labor, and the right to annul her vows. And if the husband divorces her during this betrothal period, the father could accept the divorce. But the father is not entitled to consume the yield of her property during her lifetime if she inherited it from her mother. Nisays, when the girl gets fully married, the husband is more powerful than the husband because he is entitled to the produce, the pay rice of the stuff that she owns. Remember, he has the right to use it because he has to support her. Katani bias v'katani nisas. But you see over here that they said Kiddushin through cohabitation, and then they say if she becomes married. It seems to say that cohabitation does not finalize marriage, does not create nisuin. Says the word when it says married, it's only referring to the other cases of money and document. But Bia can do it all. Bia can do both Erison and nisuin immediately. Omarova Tashma Bas Shalosh a girl who's 3 years and 1 day, Miskadeshes Bibia, can become betrothed through cohabitation. V'im Baalel Yobama Kana. And if the Yavam sleeps with her, he acquires her as his wife. V'chayavam Alel Mishum Ish. And a girl that age, if she sleeps with somebody else, is liable for adultery. Umitames Bayala. And a girl who's a nidui, she causes the one who sleeps with her to become tamei, even though she's too young to have kids and to have blood. 10b1, 10b1, right? Yeah, 10b1. Well, first learning the Gemara, then I'm going to explain. And it empowers, you know the story of the princess and the pea. She was able to feel the pea even on the bottom mattress. A nida is metama, even if she's sitting on a top mattress, she's metama all the cushions that she's sleeping on, she's sitting on. Venisis lekayen oichelis betruma. If she becomes married to a kayen, she may eat truma. Ubala echad kalarai shebetayr. If any one of the arayos, the incestual relationship, sleeps with her, misin al yada, they're put to death on her account. Vihi patura, but she's exempt because she's a child. And if she's a kayan's daughter, and one of the disqualified people sleep with her, hasla minakuna, it parcels her from the priesthood. We're going to get to your question in a minute, Jerry. Katani bia v'katani nisas. It teaches cohabitation, and then it teaches marriage. It looks like the cohabitation does not by itself finalize marriage. If the nisuin, which already was accomplished by the cohabitation for Kiddushin, had been a kohen, she's allowed to eat truma. There's no indication that cohabitation only affects Kiddushin. Here's our question about the 3-year-old. This has always been the issue. Rivka was 3 years old. Remember we talked about this, you weren't here yesterday. And I said what that means, we don't know. Because she gave permission to go. And her permission, that's where we learned that a girl must give permission to get married. Doesn't work that way. Right? And if she was 3 years old and he was 40, what kind of marriage was that? So we don't know what it means 3 years old. Okay? What it means as in all cases. At 3 years old, even today, what do we do with our young children? We move them forward. What I mean by that is, the boy gets his yarmulke, gets his hair cut, gets his first pair of scissors. He's taken to yeshiva, the Rebbe puts honey on the olive base, gives it to taste, the whole 9 yards. Right? And we all see it. Give me 1 second, everybody. Just yeah, that's so funny. Yes, they did. Very funny. What 3 years old means, in essence, is that it is a moment of passage in time. You ever watch a 3-year-old get his yarmulke, tzitzis, and all that, or a girl? You're 3 years old now, right? They begin to behave differently. They begin to behave a little more maturely. That's what happens. When it says 3 years old here, it should be understood. It doesn't mean 3 years old. It does mean what? Exactly. In other words, it's in that period. You're now in the next period of time, from 3 to 9. That's the next period of time. And then 9 years old, there's the next period of time, from 9 to, in essence, until you become 12. And if you've ever watched a child, you actually see the changes at those lampposts in time. It's like it's almost ingrained. Those are the movements in time. So don't get stuck on the thing. Absolutely not. No, it is very young. In a world where people were living in their 30s and 40s, and that was it. A 9-year-old was not young. Life expectancy in the year 1900 in New York City was 40. Do you know when child labor was taken away in New York? In the 19-teens and the 1920s. Because life started increasing. And then penicillin happened and life really increased. The reason why we don't have child labor today in America is because the lifespan is 80. If the lifespan was 40, childhood ends at 7. You start getting greater responsibilities.
Well, take a look at child labor in third world countries.
In third world countries, by 10 years old, they're working. They're working.
Yeah, but yes, it was still already that child was still
Yes.
because of how what their life expectancy.
No. So I
Use the
no.
the car is working.
Of course. That's my point. They're not. We're going to stop right here. What do you call? Let me just. This is what I'm trying to say. The Gemara is not saying at 3. You tried to do this at 3. You
12.
see the problem is at 12. At 12, you see, today we look at 12. Historically, 12, between 12 and 15, that's when people got married. That was it.
It's a shocker to hear that.
Yeah, that was not that long ago, Ben. If you knew your great grandparents, when do you think they got married? Very young. But no, not when what we think is very young. They didn't look at 14 as very young. They look at 14 as almost halfway through life. If you weren't having babies at 16, by 15, 16, when are you going to have the babies? We don't understand this idea. Look, let me show you the other side. This is a Rabbi Sachs word. Rabbi Sachs said, when you're worrying about putting food on the table, you don't have time to navel gaze and wonder if you're a boy or a girl today. You don't have time to worry about whether you're a boy or a girl today. When you're, what do you call it? When you're worrying about putting food on the table. He said, why is it that so many kids today are on Prozac and all the other stuff? What happened to our kids today that are different from before? The answer is they have too much time and they don't worry about anything. In other words, there's too much time. Let me tell you something. Baruch Hashem. Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us the Torah. Imagine our lives. Oh, all kidding aside, without this. How much golf can you possibly play?
It would be permitted, right?
They're going crazy. They're going crazy. How our yeshivas spend? You're going to look at our yeshivas and you're going to say it's horrifying. The kids go to yeshiva at 7 in the
I don't think
morning.
it's horrifying at all.
And they stay till 11. And you know why? It's a gilded prison. They don't tell the boys that it's a prison. How do you keep a bunch of Jewish boys out of trouble through teenagehood? You put up cookies and the thing. No, you do that. The farbrengen and the thing. And they're always doing something, but they're always locked up in yeshiva. Mishmar is until, what do you call it? What? They can't do anything. And what do you call it? But they're busy. They're locked up. They don't chop. They're locked up.
Sports. Otherwise, people would go
Crazy. That's right. Right? That's what I said.
Yeah, you saw. You just finished the shia?
Yeah.
Oh,
10:30.
no, I just got up for a moment, and suddenly I hear nothing. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Right. All right.
Okay. Yeah, it was just we got this is difficult stuff.
I mean,
Right.
I'm just explaining the Gemara about the 3-year-old, but it doesn't actually mean 3, it's just
Right.
up to the period of time, right?
All right,
That's all.
so tomorrow again, it's 8:45.
No, it's supposed to be in Texas.
Oh, that's
So
right.
if I make it to Texas, no shear. If I don't make it to shear, it'll be exactly the same time. I will send a WhatsApp later as soon as I know for sure whether we have a flight or not.
Yeah, how's the weather now? There you see.
Right now it's beautiful. In the other half of Florida, it's a hurricane
Oh, so the hurricane is on the west side.
on the west side, correct?
I see. Okay.
But Rachel is on her way down from New York, and they're going way out into the Atlantic. They're coming around.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and right now New York is very cloudy and it's
Yeah.
getting to rain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All righty. Very
Okay.
good.
All right, take care.
We'll see you later.
Okay, take
You
care.
got it, Dad.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.
They are already gaining, and they can probably gain without formalization of normalization or any kind of a peace agreement or anything like that. And we know